face them later. Skip, I'm sorry, it's not a good morning. You're going to have to sit through this because we have a lot to talk about. And that jersey, Shen, you might want to put it on. The Suns punched their ticket to the NBA Finals last night with a blowout 130-103 win over the Clippers. Chris Paul led the way for Phoenix with 41 points. That included 7 threes plus 8 assists and 0 turnovers. And now the 16-year vet will play for his first NBA title next week. Shannon, how surprised were you by Chris Paul's performance?
Skip, I was very surprised. You and I talked about yesterday in his 3 games that since he had returned, he had gone 19 of 60 from the floor. He had not played well. He was turning the ball over. He was not very efficient, and he wasn't Chris Paul-like. Now, maybe that COVID had something to do with that,
maybe.
But I didn't recognize the guy from the previous series because when he basically just took apart the Denver Nuggets. And then in the closeout game, he drops 37 and says, okay, now y'all know why I'm the point guard. And then I look at him, and they played so well without him the first 2 games. Cameron Payne was 29 points, 18 assists, and 0 turnovers. And I'm like, wow. No, he had more points. He had 29 one game. But he had 18 assists and 1 turnover. And I'm like, man, he's really well. And then you get Chris Paul comes back, and he's more methodical than Cameron Payne as far as pushing the pace. And he's not shooting very well because, guess what? The first game, he and Devin Booker, 10 of 40 from the field. They had gotten outplayed by the backcourt of Patrick Beverly and Reggie Jackson. And I'm like, Chris Broussard, I was like, if they continue to play like this, if that backcourt outplays the Suns' backcourt, they're going to be in trouble. And then last night, Skip, that was special. The Clippers cut it down to 7. They reinsert Chris Paul. Chris Paul scores 27 of their next 35 points. Ends the night. So he checks in. They're down. They're up 7. He checks out. They're up 24. I know that was... And great players have that ability. And that's what Chris Paul is. Chris Paul is a great player. And I'm finally glad he gets an opportunity to show it on the big stage. Everybody talks about he had a 3-1 lead. He choked that one away when he was at the Clippers. He had a couple of 3-2 leads. He let those get away. Is he going to let another one of these opportunities slip past him? He's like, nah, I'm not going to let this opportunity slip away. I thought they did something very well early, Skip. They got Paul George out of rhythm. They took Mikal Bridges and they says, okay, you follow him man to man. We're going to zone up everywhere else. So now Paul George is like, man, I got to pre-start it. He like, I wanted the game to come to me, Skip, but no one else could get going like they did the game before. Marcus Smart struggled early, but then he got it going late, which was a little bit too late. Reggie Jackson really never seemed to find his rhythm. And so Pat Bev hit a 3, was dancing, doing his little thing, but everybody knows Pat Bev can't score enough points to beat you. So they was good. As long as they kept Paul George under control and no one else went bonkers, they were going to be fine. But, Skip, I was very, very surprised. Chris Paul is 36. I mean, he's the oldest player to have 35-plus games in consecutive closeout games. Jordan had the record at 33. Chris Paul is 3 years older than Michael Jordan was when he did this. So I don't think people realize just how special of a performance what you saw last night, because he answered every run the Clippers tried to make. Chris Paul answered it with a big 3. He started dancing, Skip. You know when that mid-range start falling, you're in trouble. Because he's going to be able to get to the mid-range. Early in the series, it wasn't falling. But I was very surprised, Skip, considering that he hadn't played well in these playoffs. For him to do that away from home, that's the game I won for the other night. I wouldn't have lost all that due to you.
I am way beyond very surprised. In my career, my lengthy career, I have never, ever witnessed something so unexpected, so shocking, so that cannot be happening before my very eyes as what Chris Paul did, especially in the second half, and to your point, late third, all the way through the fourth quarter last night. I didn't see it coming because he seemed like he had become the weakest link on the Suns.
Right.
Again, you were correct yesterday, day before yesterday, campaigning, so to speak, for campaign to get a little more run. Yes, he did play him some with Chris Paul. But to your point, you wanted him to get equal minutes with Chris Paul because Chris Paul was looking a little bit old and a little bit slow. To my eye, when Chris Paul, until last night, tried to shoot a 3, he had to kind of put a little oomph in it to just get it to the bucket.
Right.
And he had gone 0 for his last 9 in the 2 previous games from 3 before this happened. He made 7 of 8 threes last night. That's impossible.
Right.
How much would you have bet against him making 7 of 8 after he was 0 for 9 and 2 for 16 for this series in the games that he played?
Right.
When you think back to this playoffs, he banged up his shoulder so badly against your Lakers that he couldn't go for a while.
Right.
He couldn't even, like, shoot it sideways up to the basket, right?
First 3 games, he weren't very good.
No. And then all of a sudden, in the next big shock, he got COVID. He was vaccinated, and he got COVID. I don't know if he had symptoms. I don't know if he got sick.
Right.
I don't know if that weighed him down a little bit when he tried to come back after the first 2 games, which you correctly and aptly kept pointing out. They won without Chris Paul, right?
Yeah.
And he comes back, and it was starting to look like, dare I say, he was becoming a liability in those 3 games. Again, 19 of 60 through those 3 games. That
and he wasn't even his normal defensive self.
3, 4, and 5. 19 of 60. That's 32% from the floor that he was shooting.
Wow.
And at one point, Boogie Cousins just took the ball away from him at half court and went down and scored, right?
Yep.
When does that happen to the point guard?
Right.
So I'm thinking, man, I don't know about him. If you told me that Devin Booker had scored 50 last night, I'd say, okay, you got me. And you wanted to bet me that he was going to score 40, and what did he wind up with, like 22, okay? He wasn't needed. But my point is, here's the bottom line. After the game, Chris Paul says something on ESPN about, it got so bad that I even needed to get an MRI on my hand. And I'm saying, what MRI? I don't know anything about MRI. And today, this morning, I read in USA Today, according to them, Chris Paul has torn ligaments in his shooting wrist.
Wow.
Torn ligaments in his shit. That's what they said.
Right.
That's the report in today's USA Today after the MRI of 2 days ago revealed he had torn ligaments. What?
Oh, from the undercut, when Pat Bev undercut him on the 3, or when did he do it?
I don't know.
Oh.
I don't know. That hasn't been specified, but maybe we'll find out more today or tomorrow about that as they come back from celebration. And by the way, speaking of celebration, our friend Lil Wayne was right in the middle of it because he's very close with Chris Paul.
Right.
He's going to join us from his home up in the San Fernando Valley at about 11:30 Eastern to go inside the Chris Paul that he first... Remember, Chris got drafted by New Orleans, and Wayne was just splashing at that point with that Carter 2 maybe in 2005.
Right.
So he was just arriving at the top of the rap game, and he and Chris became close friends, and Wayne went to every game at Staples in this series just to be there for him, sat courtside right across from the Phoenix bench. So we'll get into that.
Right.
And he'll give you more insight into Chris's psyche. But you want to talk about guts last night? The weight of the NBA world, I thought, was on Chris Paul's shoulder because he has a long history of coming up small in playoff games. He's blown a 3-1 lead. He's blown 2-0 leads. And all of a sudden, it was starting to look like it was full momentum Clippers. And there are a couple of moments that I'll get into in a minute that looked like last night, here come the Clippers being the Clippers again. And in the end, Chris Paul said, no, I don't care if I got torn ligaments. I don't care if I got COVID. I'm not going to let this happen. I'm going to the NBA Finals for the first time in my now 16-year NBA career. Well, that's extraordinary. That's impossible. That is greatness. I got to tell you, that's sheer greatness. I genuflect for that one.
But they did, Skip. They did get off to a good start, better than what they did the night before.
That wasn't Chris that got them off to a good start.
But I was still concerned because I watched Pat Bev cross Chris Paul up. I'm like, Patrick Beverly crossed Chris Paul's an all-defensive guy. And you let Pat Bev is not known for handles. I'm like, oh, my God. I said, man, you know what? It just might be, Skip. It might be the Clippers' time.
Okay, so the Suns had jumped out to as much as a 10-point lead early in that game.
Right.
And to your point, here came the Clippers featuring Patrick Beverly. And finally, Reggie Jackson joined the party with an and one, and with 5:35 left in the second quarter, the score got to be 50-all. And I thought, uh-oh, and I don't know what you thought, but I thought
the same thing.
Here they come. And guess who showed up at the party at that point? Somebody that you've been all over. You said, we need more from Jay Crowder, the man who got clowned by LeBron James in game was it 3? Yes, game
yeah.
3 at
Up
Staples.
up and under.
When he leaned and leaned and leaned and then spun all around him and went up and under on him. That same Jay Crowder, in the last 4 games against the Clippers, he had scored 2 points, 9 points, 3 points, and 4 points. That's an average of 4.5 points a game.
Right.
He was 6 of 24 in the previous 4 games and 4 of 19 from 3. And in games 4 and 5, he was 1 of 10 from 3. And guess what happened when it got